Well, hello there. My name is Rob Broadhead, and I am the founder of RB Consulting, and want to spend a little time today talking about the age-old question of build versus buy. This is something that we have seen throughout our lives, whether we know it or not, but usually we do. It's a very common problem, or a very common question, at least, whether you're talking about a business or an organization, a corporation, or even a personal problem. We see this build or buy decision all throughout our life. A good example would be our checkbook, our finances. It may be that we want to essentially build our own solution, which would be maybe it's pencil and paper, or maybe we write software and we're going to build our whole financial package, or maybe we're really good at spreadsheets and so we're going to build a solution using a spreadsheet. Or on the buy side of it, it may be that we buy a template for our spreadsheet, or we buy a book or tool that allows us to write down our transactions better, or maybe we buy like a Quicken or something like that, or QuickBooks, or a bigger financial system, depending on what we're trying to solve. And we have to look at, we don't always have to, but we should look at a lot of different places that decision needs to be made, or essentially things that should weigh which direction we go. They should sort of guide us where our selection needs to be. And in so doing, if we have some questions, we have some guidelines, which is what we're going to talk about here, is maybe we can have a process that allow us to get to a better decision in less time. Now, the first thing we want to do is ask why. What is it that we are trying to solve, and why are we posed this challenge of build versus buy? Now, typically there's three measures of a solution. You've got quality, resources, and time. So if you want higher quality, it's probably going to cost you more resources and time. If you want it quickly, then it's probably going to cost you, more resources, or it may require you to, reduce the quality. And if all of those things mix up in various ways. So really, what is the primary driver? When you're trying to figure out a solution and you're looking at, do I build or do I buy? What is the thing that you're trying to solve for? Are you trying to improve the quality of your solution? Are you trying to reduce the resources, like the cost of it, or the people that you have to have working on this? Or maybe as resources, like you just want to reduce paper. And then time is, how long does it take you? And there's time could be the resource as far as how much time does it take, but we're talking here about how much time are you going to allow before you can have that solution available to you? Is this something where you need that solution tomorrow? Or are you okay if that solution is given to you 6 months from now? That is often one of the things we don't think about until we really get into it, because especially with our modern society of microwaves and stuff like that, we want it now. And sometimes that's not the case, depending on what our solution is. And these things, this why is really our foundation for some of our later questions, because we may need to go back to this and refer to this and say, well, this thing I really like, but it's going to cost me more money and I'm trying to save money. So maybe that nixes that or removes that option. Now, second question is really important more for organizations, but even with personal situations, which is, what resources do you have right now? So do you have, if you want to build a solution, do you already have a team or the skill set or the experience to be able to do that? For example, I mentioned a spreadsheet solution for your finances. Do you already have a license for a spreadsheet, or is that something you're going to have to buy? Is there a defined time frame, which goes back to that time question a little bit, in which you need to address this situation? Is it something where you don't necessarily have the resources and you may not have time to get those resources? So it's another time factor. It's things like, hey, I want to build this software. I want to build a software solution. So I don't have a team, but I need to get a team. But then how long is it going to take me to actually go get that team? And very simple stuff could be, like, think of just your lunch. It could be that you want to build your lunch, that you want to just make a sandwich or make your own lunch at home. Or maybe you have to go out and you're like, hey, I'm going to go and just pick up some fast food. But when you're thinking about building your lunch at home, do you have what you need to be able to build your lunch? Or are you going to have to go out and get that stuff, purchase those resources first, and then come back? Those kinds of almost like chicken and egg type of issues can constantly show up, and we need to be aware of those as we're thinking through these things. And of course, with your current situation, what's the budget? As far as maybe time you can allot towards this, money that you can allot towards this, team members that you can allot towards this. And when you think about build versus buy, this sometimes in an organization can be a very big factor. A lot of times, what can we afford in time is very important, but also what can we afford in time invested from our, either yourself or your team members? Because sometimes that can be a huge factor in it. When everything gets, compare everything, they're all equal, except for you may have a situation where if you're going to build your own solution, your team, your resources are going to have to spend more time thinking about that and working through that and making sure it's the right solution versus maybe, if you go buy it, somebody's already thought about those problems, all of those factors that are involved, and they'll be able to get you a solution sooner rather than later, but also with less time invested from your team. And then with this sort of in a general question, but definitely in your current situation, is what is it that you want and what is it you need when you look back at the problem you're solving? For a solution, what is it that you would like to have versus the things that you need to have, as in this thing must do A, B, and C, or else it's not a valid solution for us. Because sometimes the wants can be set aside, whereas the needs are not. Now, even in thinking about that wants versus needs, I think it's very helpful to start with what we'll call perfection. What does the perfect or the best solution look like to this problem without constraining yourself even in reality? I mean, there's some limits to it, but generally speaking, it's things like, hey, if money's not an option, or if time's not an option, or start reducing restrictions and give yourself sort of that stretch goal or that really audacious goal of what does the best solution look like, because we're going to end up using some of those things as we're evaluating which way do we want to go. And then whether we're building it or buying it, evaluating solutions or incorporating certain features and functions into our solution. Now, once you have the perfect solution, you also want to ask yourself, just sort of like do an assessment of that. Why is that a perfect solution? Why does that perfectly solve your problem? Because within the answer to that question is going to go back to your why, but also it's going to give you some additional factors or some additional attributes to the solution that you're going to want to have in mind as you're thinking through this, as you're working through what is a good solution that I can either build or that I can buy. One thing that a lot of organizations that I've worked with, and even a lot of personal people, I think we do this. This is a question we miss a lot, is we get a little too focused on now. I need this problem solved now, and here are the options. We don't think enough about growth and future state. So particularly with an organization, but even if you're doing this personally, where do you expect to be in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever? Where do you see the problem and the solution growing and changing? So for an organization, this is very common where today we're solving a problem for, let's say, 100 customers. And our goal is to have 500 customers next year. Well, does our solution today for 100 customers, is that going to translate and still support 500 customers? Or can it, is there a growth path or something like that? Because we don't want to get ourselves in a situation, and sometimes we do, where we buy a solution or we build a solution and we're great for 6 months, and then it's not there for us anymore. It's not doing what we need it to do, and we either need to review this whole thing and build or buy again, or we need to buy more that maybe we didn't expect to, or we need to build onto or build out or enhance the solution that we built. So what is that? This is really, you don't have to go all the way through this again, but it is sort of a, what do we need today? What does this solution look like? When we even just talked about the perfect solution, and maybe this question will even adjust what a perfect solution looks like. But also, we need to now look a little bit in the future, and by a little bit, I mean it could be at least a couple of years. And maybe, if it's something you're going to be stuck with this for 10 years, then you need to look that far out. But what does the ideal solution look like 2 years from now, 5 years from now? And in particular, if you have some sort of an upgrade or update or budgetary policy where you're only going to be able to adjust this or make changes to this, say, every 3 years, then you need to make sure that the solution you get today is still going to be useful enough in 3 years. And then, of course, you can look at it from there. You can adjust. But sometimes that's the issue that I've seen companies get into as well, is that you don't think far enough ahead. You get to a point 3 years from now, it's not really cutting it for you anymore. And now you end up in this sort of like duct tape and baling wire approach to your solution, because you're just trying to make this thing continue, because you sort of get yourself backed into a corner, as opposed to looking ahead enough to say either, hey, we need to have something that grows, or we need to replace this with whatever we'll need, to solve that problem. And that is valid. It may be that you look at it and you say, you know what, where we are with our resources today, this is the limit. This is what we can do. Now, 3 years from now, we're going to need something else. But also 3 years from now, maybe we have more revenue. We have more freedom, more ability to purchase or build a more extensive solution. So this is where we're also thinking about, like, what do we have today, but also what additional problems do we need to solve in the future? Because if we're building or buying, maybe we can address some of those now, or at least have placeholders or hooks or something like that into the system or the solution that will allow us to grow into or advance into that solution in the future. And one of the things is sort of along this is like a fixer-upper or growing into a solution, because sometimes we can get a solution that is like, let's say it's a 80-20 rule. So 80% of it covers, 20% of it, basically the bulk of it covers most of what we do, 80% of what we need. And maybe there's another 20% it doesn't, and that's going to be costly, or that's going to be a pain for us to deal with. But maybe it is something where we'll take the 80% solution and we'll call it a fixer-upper, where we're going to be able to either add on a couple of additional features or, let's say, tools to be able to solve it. Or maybe there's some customization that, yes, we'll need to spend time customizing, but at least it gets us mostly there. Those are all things that we need to factor into. What does our solution look like today? What can we afford? What's ideal? And then what can we afford? Sort of getting the high and the low boundaries. And then how do we take that to basically solve our problem today, but then also be positioned for the future? Because that, like I said, often is the thing that we sort of stumble across. Now, ownership is something, again, that I think we too often get into it late in the game. And ownership is not necessarily ownership of source code or something like that, but it's owning the solution. So who needs to own the solution? Is this something that you or your organization has the resources to own it, to maintain it, to enhance it, to sort of say, okay, Here's our solution. And if there's changes, if the problem changes, if the environment changes, if there's regulatory changes, if there's software upgrades, whatever, do we have the resources to be able to move into that future state? And are we okay? Are we comfortable owning that solution? Or do we need somebody else that we go to and say, hey, this, the core business environment or whatever changed. We need you to upgrade, enhance, whatever it takes to take that solution and move it now to whatever the modern solution is, 6 months, a year, whatever down the road. With ownership, are there regulations or other requirements that you need to take into account? For example, if you have, whether in the health industry or finance, there's some times where you have situations where your data can't live in certain places or can't transfer to certain places. And not to get into the details, but just something like that is something where maybe you need to own that. You need to own the solution. You need to be able to protect and secure your own data. Or it could be intellectual property. It could be that you have a problem you're solving and the solution is part of your organizational secret sauce. It is something that you're doing this and you're solving this in a way that is going to make you, able to compete better with other organizations. In which case, you want to own that. You don't want to have somebody else come in maybe and be able to do that for you and then turn around and do the same thing for your competition. And now you've lost your competitive edge. And there is definitely a balance of responsibility and ownership versus response times and leverage. If you buy a solution, then and something goes wrong, then you're going to have to contact the vendor. You're going to have to make sure it's under, within their support agreement. You're going to have to make sure you're waiting on them to respond. And you may not be their primary, concern at the time. So the response time could be immediate, or it could be something where, hey, you're just put in queue and they'll get to you when they get to you, which may be okay. But it may be that you need a faster response. And if you own the solution, then you own it. You have the ability to use your resources within your company or hire additional resources or do whatever it takes. It's sort of if you think of the worst case situation, if somebody else owns it, you can throw all the time and money and resources at that problem you want, but it may be that you are blocked by them. You're blocked by what their time and resources are. Sometimes there's just no way to put enough leverage to get yourself to the front of the line. If you own it, then you do have that opportunity. You do have a situation where, hey, I have access to everything I need to be able to change this. And so if I need it bigger, better now, I can do that. Not always something you need, but it's something to think about. So in summary, just sort of walking through these, just to simplify it down to 5 questions that you need to ask. 1, why are you evaluating this problem and what do you hope to gain? What is it that the solution looks like that it's going to give you or earn for you? Where are you at currently? And what is your ability to move to a new solution, whether that is build or buy? Because sometimes you need to, just thinking about this a little bit, is sometimes you need to buy today because you need it sooner rather than later, even though you would rather build it. Number 3, what would the perfect or an ideal solution look like? Let's make sure that when we're going into this, that we're not limiting ourselves by what we think is available or what we think we can do. Let's look at what are the facets of the perfect solution and sort of ask for all of it when we're going through it, whether we're asking it as part of our building or we're asking it as part of our buying a solution. What does the future look like? Will your future plans be supported? That's going to be whichever solution you keep in mind. Does this work for me 6 months from here, a year from now? And then who needs to own the solution? Are you comfortable saying, yep, once we've got it, I'm ready to go. I'm going to take ownership of this and be fine going forward? Or Is it something where you're like, I don't want to think about this? Great example would be if you're an entrepreneur and you're building out a company, but your skills are not in financial and HR, where you may just say, you know what, I want to outsource my accounting, my finance, my HR stuff, because I don't want to own the solution. I want somebody else to worry about it. So those are your 5 questions. If you go into build versus buy with just those, the exercise is going to help you really get a good start on your requirements. And sometimes just within this, it will really heavily direct you towards whether you need to build or whether you can buy a solution. And this is before you've even examined the market that's out there when you think about buying. Like what solutions are out there? That could eventually stop you, but most often what's going to happen is you're going to be able to just sort of adjust what you will get when you buy it. And then, it may have to reverse back, but this is your great start. This gives you a start that most people, I think, don't have. Too often I get into conversations and find out that there are one of these questions in particular, maybe more, that they haven't thought about. And that is a key part of getting to what are we really trying to get out of this. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. I hope that this was valuable. If you have any questions, send them to rob@rb-sns.com. You can also go to rb-sns.com, check out, we've got a link right there. You got a button, you can schedule a free assessment and sit down and talk with us about what is it that you're looking to do, whether you're trying to build or buy, and we can help guide you a little bit and ask some guiding questions, maybe dig a little deeper on a couple of these and let you know whether it's something that we can build for you, whether we can help you, go through an RFP process, figure out what you can buy, or just help you figure out who are the vendors out there, who are the people that are specialists in your space to help you get to where you need to be. Let us know if you have any questions, any way that we can help. We're always happy to do so. Go out there and have yourself a great day.